Okay, so
already
hello
late.
everyone. The following presentation, just a quick disclaimer for the presentation. We
hello everyone.
This presentation
Very glad that
Data
you
Science Summit. So if
came
you see
here.
any logos or something
And
like that, don't be confused.
Today we will
quite
present
well received,
our
so
project.
you like it too.
Unveiling the semantic essence, text embedding summarization. And we did
state-of-the-art techniques in information
of,
retrieval and question answering systems.
A team of me, Jankowski,
our team actually composes of 4 people. Krzysztof unfortunately couldn't be here today with us, and he played a huge part in this project.
Our external supervisor from
and
other
also
company
this
from
project
QA
have been possible with our supervisors, Michał
and our
TCL.
internal supervisor.
So thank you for that.
You can say.
Okay, so. The agenda is quite packed. I'm going to do just a quick introduction to retrieval systems and QA systems, and Antoni is going to talk about evaluation, and Michał is also going to talk about our results.
Everybody from audience
motivations, okay, so LLMs are not reliable, they hallucinate, so we would like to improve them
vector databases and everything
from our database,
but the problem is
of our corpus.
QA in this example,
yeah, so that's why we need
they have a lot of documents encoded,
so they don't hallucinate, they give us reliable answers based on factual knowledge.
To make
and this is the basic
of them,
pipeline
of clusters that they define,
we have our question, and we have
but without accessing
and
all documents from database.
Queries, the knowledge database based on the question,
or
retrieve some relevant passages,
is
and then LLM can answer based on these facts. We retrieve
from
clusters
that are already defined.
How this retrieval part works, this pipeline.
With access to the encoder.
We have a query, we encode it to
our goal
a
is
vector
to generate a meaningful description of cluster without knowing all of information, knowing only the embedding of passages original text.
And then we just look at cosine similarity and find the closest passages to our question. To train a dense retriever, we usually have, like I said, we have vector representations of a question, of our relevant passages, of an irrelevant passage, and we want those representations, those vectors, to be either close or far apart from each other. In order to do that, we use contrastive learning. Yeah, this is a great formula that asserts that our relevant passages are close to questions and not relevant are far apart in terms of cosine similarity. And when we have trained our retriever, we can then perform inference. We usually want to, since our corpus is static, we usually have a database of those sort vectors, so we don't have to compute them at every time. Then we just pass the query through the encoder, we get a vector, and we look at the closest ones. Okay, so that was dense retrievers, that was your neural networks. We also used classical retrievers, so exactly BM25 or best match 25. This is a classical retriever. That means it looks at keywords and it looks at statistical counts of words in our query and in those passages, right? And it compares them. So this is really good at finding like some really obscure words. Dense retrievers are better at like general semantic, meaning that it found in the training data. And some examples. So these models are gonna be a part of our presentation, our research. So we have Dragon. This is a model from Meta. It was distilled from other retrievers. So it used other retrievers to obtain scores about whether a question is relevant to the passage. We also have Arctic Embed, which is really good. It's really recent and it's state of the art. It uses a bunch of tricks to obtain a huge performance. And BM25, as I said earlier, like one caveat is that implementation of this classical retriever matters. So when we didn't switch to Elasticsearch, we had really slow times. Like Elasticsearch improved our times like 100 by a factor of 100. So that's good to keep in mind. And now Antoni is going to talk about how to actually evaluate those retrievers.
Right, so what we use for evaluation is the bare dataset benchmark. It's a well-known benchmark for evaluating retrieval and re-ranking. It consists of multiple data sets, which some of them have very tough questions, like scientific ones. Some of them have very simple questions, and some of them are in English, some of them are in other languages. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. And the metrics we use to evaluate them, well, hopefully all of you already know what is precision and recall, since you already are finishing the degree of machine learning. But we will not look at precision and recall. We will actually look at the metric called NDCG, normalized discounted cumulative gains, because it captures both whether we retrieve the correct passages and the ordering of the retrieved passages. So that's the first reason why we use NDCG, and the other reason is that it always normalizes the scores between 0 and 1. So a perfect retrieval, no matter the data set, no matter the amount of relevant passages, it will always get a score of 1. And now looking at our basic models. So here all of the result slides will look similarly. We always look at NDCG at 10, so we retrieve 10 documents and we look whether those retrieved documents are relevant to the query or not. And here on this slide, we actually compared the baseline models, so the ones that Michał presented, the two implementations of BM25, which is the sparse retriever, as well as the two dense retrievers, Dragon and Arctic. And as we can see on the average over the whole data set, the dense retrievers perform slightly better than BM25, especially the Arctic retriever, which is by some considered state-of-the-art. However, we can see some strange results on some of the data sets. For example, on German quad, we can see that the sparse retrievers perform better. And this is quite interesting because sparse retrievers are irrelevant to the language they are being used on, whereas the dense retrievers, they are trained on some data. And if the data is in another language than we actually use it for, then it might result in worse performance. So in summary, we know that in some cases the sparse retrievers perform better, in other cases the dense retrievers perform better. So one approach could be to somehow combine both of those types of retrievers, and there's actually quite a lot of different ways we can do that, and we will explore it in the next parts of the presentation. So one of the methods of combining would be re-ranking, and Michał is going to tell about re-ranking.
Okay, so a very common approach in any retrieval process in general is so-called two-stage retrieval, in which in the first stage we use the previously mentioned methods to retrieve a potentially larger group of documents, which then we re-rank using a potentially more complex, more robust model to improve the results. And for the information retrieval re-ranking problem, a very commonly used module class is the cross-encoder family. And in contrast to biencoders, they take both the query and the document as an input, pass it through to a single model, usually a transformer, and output the relevance score between the query and the passage. And in our experiments, we used BGE re-ranker. That was a state-of-the-art and an open source model.
Yes, and looking at the results of this BGE re-ranker, on this chart we have the baseline model BM25, and what happens when we retrieve more than 10 passages and we re-rank them using this BGE re-ranker. And what we can see on average is that the more passages we retrieve using this BM25 and then re-rank them, the better our score overall gets. So the re-ranker actually works and improves the result. A very similar thing can be noticed in the elastic BM25, which is just a different implementation. But when it comes to those dense retrievers, so for example, Dragon or Arctic, if we retrieve too many passages with those retrievers, then sometimes this BGE re-ranker can pull up some irrelevant passages from the end back onto the top. And this is what can actually lower the results. So on average, both in the Dragon and Arctic retrievers, we can see that if we retrieve too many, for example, 80 passages using Arctic, and then we let the re-ranker re-rank them, we actually slightly lower the results. So we have to be careful with using this re-ranker.
Okay, another approach to this re-ranking problem is to use large language models to perform this. And as you can see, that the most popular method of prompting these models to perform this task is so-called permutation generation, in which we pass to the model the query alongside with content of many different passages with some IDs, and we ask the model to output these IDs ranked by the relevance to the question. And in our experiments, we used the rank Zephyr model that is currently the state-of-the-art open source model fine-tuned for this problem. And we can see its prompt here, and it also uses this permutation generation approach.
Yes, and now when we apply this LLM re-ranking process to our, for example, Dragon Retriever, we can actually compare whether this re-ranking is better than the BGE cross-encoder re-ranking. So that's the yellow bar is the BGE re-ranker, the green bar is the rank Zephyr. And we can see that on average, the results are very similar between both of those re-rankers. But what is very interesting is that this green bar is quite higher on data sets in the frames numbered 2, which are very scientific data sets. So what we can infer from that is that those LLM re-rankers actually perform better on very hard domains, like very heavily scientific ones. And that's where you could think about using LLM re-rankers more than cross-encoder re-rankers. And a very similar thing happens when we apply it to Arctic. However, here the gain using those re-rankers is lower, because probably just the Arctic retriever is strong in itself. So that's why the gain on average is not as big, but in those scientific data sets, this rank Zephyr LLM re-ranker is actually improving the results.
Okay, so we talked about how we can use the re-ranker to improve the results of a single retriever, but we also can use it as a way to combine the results of many different retrievers. And in this case, in next experiments, we combined the result from the dense retriever with the results from the classical retriever.
Yes, so here on this chart we actually look at two of those dense retrievers, Dragon and Arctic, and what we compare is just using the single dense retriever against using it alongside the sparse BM25 retriever, and then using the re-ranker to combine the results. And in each case, so for example, when you compare the blue and the yellow bar, which is the combination of those two retrievers, performs better than just using a single dense retriever. And especially we can see the gain on data sets, for example, in another language like German Quad, where we already know that the sparse retriever is irrelevant to the language, and that's why it improves the result quite drastically there.
Okay, there is a small experiment that we conducted using not fine-tuned Mistral 7 with 7 billion parameters, and we prompted it to perform the binary classification of which passage is more relevant to the query, and in this way we ranked passages. And unfortunately, it didn't work out because, first of all, it was really slow, and its performance was also worse than of the other re-rankers. Okay, so to quickly sum up, we've seen that the cross-encoders re-rankers worked pretty well while being very fast. But they didn't work so well on the as a final output of these models, while the LLM re-rankers are slower, but usually the performance is a little bit better. Okay, so now we will talk about how we can also combine results of different re-rankers. So the motivation behind this is that the embedding re-ranker is slower, but it can perform this filtering of large numbers of documents well, and the LLM's re-rankers are slow, but they perform better, so we will try to somehow combine them to get the best of two worlds. And we will introduce some concepts like this chain re-ranking. And it simply means that we will sequentially apply each re-ranker after the next one, so that the first one re-ranks incoming results, then we take top k of these results, pass it to the next re-ranker, and so on and so on.
Yes, and now we can compare those just using a single re-ranker. So we have a baseline model, the Dragon model on the left, then we have the two next bars are the basic single re-rankers, and then the last bar is the combination of the chain combination of two re-rankers. We can actually see that combining those two re-rankers in the way that is shown actually improves the results and achieves the best ones, and a very similar thing can be observed for the Arctic model. However, here the gain is very, very slight.
Okay, another concept that we introduce is the split re-ranking, and in this method we re-rank only the worst passages, while keeping some top k, top 10 passages unchanged, and then we concatenate these results. And the motivation behind this approach is that when we have a very good retriever, then it might be not worth to pass the best results to a not good performing re-ranker.
Yes, exactly, and we can see that when using this split approach compared to just chain re-ranking, we can actually see that well, both in the case of Dragon and Arctic, the even positioned bars perform well, at least on par, but in the case of Arctic, they actually outperform this chain re-ranking. So the split approach, where we remain the top 10 passages retrieved by Arctic, which are already quite good, and then we apply the re-ranking to only the other ones, it actually improves our results.
Okay, so coming to the final architecture, which combines all the methods that we talked before. On the top, we have the method that we mentioned in the previous experiment. So this is this split chain re-ranker, and we concatenate its results with the results of the classical retriever BM25 that is also re-ranked. We take the best results of these two different sources, we concatenate them, run through LLM re-ranker, which generates the final results.
Yes, so don't be afraid of this chart, but this is basically showing all of our, let's say, the whole road that we actually took. So starting from the left, we just looked at the sparse retriever BM25. Then we looked, obviously it performs the worst. Then we looked at how we can improve it using a BG re-ranker, which the yellow bar is, and it improves it. The green bar is how the Arctic retriever performs, which is already better. And then all the next bars are applying first the chain re-ranking, then the split chain approach, and then the last bar is the architecture shown on the previous slide. And we can actually see that it basically performs the best on average. And we can actually see that it beats just the Arctic model on 11 of the 16 datasets in the whole Bayer benchmark. So summarizing, by using different re-rankers and combining different retrievers, we can achieve a lot better results by combining basically the strengths of each of those approaches. And well, probably we don't have much time, but we used many different libraries, and for example, we used Hydra to store our configs. We used Hugging Face to download and use the models there, and also compare ourselves to different models on the benchmarking leaderboards. We used PyTorch to train and to call those models, and we used FICE for the vector store of our passage database. And our conclusions are that we actually were able to produce quite a strong model by utilizing those different approaches. And our next steps would be, if we had more time on this project, would be to actually try to distill the pipeline into a single model and maybe use an approach where the model automatically chooses which approach is best for the given data set. And our contributions, we did a lot of work on this project, especially when trying to implement those different pipelines. But in the end, let's say this combination of models, when we compared ourselves on the retrieval leaderboard, we achieved a top 15 place, which we are quite happy about because we were rivaling, for example, Arctic or OpenAI or all those Meta, Google, all those other companies. And actually, on some of the data sets in the benchmark, we achieved state-of-the-art #1 position on the leaderboard, which is quite interesting. Okay, thank you for listening. Unfortunately, Krzysztof was not here, but he was a big part of our team, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.